Talk Tuesday. My name is Kelly J. You can say who you are. You don't have to. What would you like to say?
G'day, Kelly J. It's you can call me Josh. Again, I phoned last week. I didn't realise it was going to be this kind of lull. I've woken up quite early to have a chat. How are you going?
Yeah, I'm really good. How are you, Josh?
Yeah, good. I followed up on a few things from last week, and there's a lot of ground that we could potentially cover, but obviously I don't want to clog up your phone lines. But I know the local member here in Brisbane, Stephen Bates for the Greens Party, you tried to use the Immigration Act to block you from coming into Australia.
I know.
And I thought that wasn't great for free speech. So I did a little bit of digging and made a few phone calls just to sort of see if you know, free speech was respected by this particular political party and these particular individuals. And it was a fascinating little journey. So I thought I'd tell you a bit about that if you're interested.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I phoned his office and I got some young, enthusiastic girl who was very happy to recite a whole bunch of cliches around the trans issue. And I wasn't, you know, surprised by that at all, but just the tiniest little bit of sort of scratching the surface. And it turned into one of the most frustrating conversations possibly of my life, at least that I can recall. Because I tried to simply draw, you know, a very polite, diplomatic circle around some of the concerns of yours, which I happen to think might have some validity. And like me finishing the sentence of, you know, there being concerns about men in women's prisons, this person was so captured that she responded with, "Oh no, that's not possible. That doesn't happen." And the logic being, I sort of cracked it that once someone says they're a woman, they absolutely are. So therefore, there are no men in women's prisons, and this isn't a problem because they've so thoroughly the identification is so magical and so all-encompassing that these concerns just evaporate, you know, with the casting of this spell. And it's like, wow, we've really, so that phone call didn't end well. I don't know how, I'm not sure if I should give you the rushed version or not, but I followed up because she did happen to mention that Stephen Bates, who is the MP, was going to be at the markets on Saturday. So I made a point of just swinging by there to say hello. And I was prepared for the worst, was pleasantly, I don't know, I won't say surprised or empowered, but do you want to give you a rundown of that conversation?
Do it. Come on.
Okay. All right. Sure. I've got notes. I took notes of the whole thing that as it unfolded. Yeah, here we go. It's interesting, like the way these guys defend trans people in terms of how awful it is to other people. Like racism is a charge of othering, and transphobia and homophobia are charges of othering. Yet anybody who disagrees or has the slightest reservation about men not being women or women not being able to be men, like the whole sex change philosophy from a reality-based standpoint, as I call it, it's very, very interesting how quickly those people can become Nazis. So the references that were made to you specifically and their supposed justification for trying to use the Immigration Act. So on the basis of protecting the community, they wanted to block you. On the first girl I spoke to on the phone, she was saying that you were associated with some gun groups and you were going to bring guns over or something. Like, that's interesting. She's in the UK.
Really?
They don't have guns. Yeah. And the lawyers could have a field day, like libel, like the stuff that was said about you was just amazing. But it's quite telling. Like, they really need to build you up as a supervillain. Otherwise, like, how dare they humanize you? They couldn't possibly like hold those two thoughts at the same time. So, but Stephen hadn't heard the gun argument, but he did sort of have you guilty by association. This is like something to do with the Proud Boys, something to do with Oath Keepers. I've tried to Google your name with both of these organizations and couldn't find any of the, you know, damning video evidence, which one would assume has to exist. There's a particular little gem that Stephen Bates was relying on, and it's an image that is just comical. I don't know if you've heard it, or perhaps you've got the video footage, because I've been, you know, following your cast for some time and haven't seen you, or I've missed the part where you sign off with Hail Hitler, but he said allegedly, like, he didn't say allegedly, he said this was actually happening. So on this basis, I don't know if there's room for legal action, but he said that Kelly J. Keane, oh yes, she's the one who read at a giant rally, read Mein Kampf and swapped trans people for Jews.
Wow. I'd like to see that video. Maybe it's a really good deep fake.
I don't know.
I'm joking. I don't think anyone spent that much time on me. No, that doesn't exist.
exists only in his imagination. But that was the thing, like they needed to draw such long bows to have any resistance to what you were saying. So, and it was the conversation with Stephen wasn't as frustrating as I thought it was going to be. Like we managed to hit some common ground on like the need for free speech, although his was extremely contingent and very conditional. In the same breath that he said, yes, I believe in free speech, he dropped hate speech and said, oh, there's an interesting, way to invalidate everything you just said about respecting free speech. The conversation was interesting. We covered a lot of sort of, typical concerns, but it was only like he had basically no regard for women, as do most people. Sadly, it seems. It was once I played the "this is affecting gay people" card, then I felt the tide slightly turn, or I felt like an idea actually plant in this guy's head. So,
that's because some gay people actually have penises, and therefore they are valid. That's
and in terms of like the trans movement potentially turning a generation of kids that might have otherwise grown up to be gay into like sterilized people who have done irreversible biological harm to themselves. And he barely took that point, like didn't want to acknowledge it, but I could tell that it landed. He trotted out the line, once I started highlighting these collisions of ideas, he tried to drop out the line, sex versus gender. And I know when people do that, they don't mean it, or they'll use it sometimes when it suits them. And I had an immediate rebuttal to pretty much everything he had to say. And it was a fun conversation. I wish I'd been able to record it. But I've made a lot of phone calls and taken the political temperature as best as I could. And it's hard to find. There was one MP who actually phoned me back and we had a long chat in great agreement. But he's on a different coloured team that would ordinarily, warrant scorn from left-leaning people. He's on the Blue Party, and it's weird how sort of brand loyalty has taken over, and political arguments, or actually reason has left the building again. We spoke about that last week.
Yeah, so, it's so terrifying. I do honestly, I've got to this point. So I talk to women, black women in America who would call themselves radical feminists, and they talk about the only reason civil rights in America was listened to at all is because it impacted men, and the plight of black women nobody cares about. You're 3 times as likely to be killed in your own home as a black woman than a white woman in the US, and that never gets talked about. That's never a disparity that anybody wants to discuss. And I wonder if you just said lesbians and not said gay people, whether you would have even had a flicker of recognition from Stephen Bates. Now, I'm not saying anything about him in particular. I just think it really is that. I think gay liberation happened because it was, gays and lesbians fought for it, but ultimately gay men were the ones that were liberated. Women was just a side effect of the liberation for men. Well,
yeah, no, you're right, definitely. I don't think, like there's maybe a tiny little bit of credit left on the gay guilt credit card that you can cash in on this argument, and people will give you the time of day and say, oh yeah, actually maybe you've got a point. But like in terms of erasing gay spaces with swapping out sex for gender, and suddenly the entire notion of homosexuality just vanishes, and wow, how easy was that?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the heterosexual debt, so I can't join that gay credit card scheme of yours. But it's so lovely to talk to you, and I really hope to. Where are you again? Melbourne?
No, I'm in Brisbane. Yeah, and I sent you an email. It was fascinating, actually. I don't want to take up too much more time, but I did have a chat with ChatGPT on the subject of Christopher Hitchens to try to render a position from him on trans ideology versus religion. And it was a fascinating conversation. So initially, this thing is highly programmed to avoid, to toe the line on politically correct issues, as it were, and it shut me down for about 5 different responses. But you can sort of keep insisting. And once I insisted that no, ideas are not people, and all ideas are up for discussion, or else what kind of tyranny are we living in? It's like, oh, all right, well, I'll maybe on that basis answer some questions. And then it took me maybe sort of 10 prompts, and then calling out its own hypocrisy and said, hang on, you've just used the word cisgender. Some people consider that a hate term. Why are you using hate speech to justify your argument? And then it's like, oh, no, don't take it the wrong way. So it's very intelligent, but it did eventually give me an essay that Christopher Hitchens may easily have written, and talking about
I will read it, I promise.
Yeah, anyway, I could take up too much time, but check it out. And thanks for the work you do. You're amazing. And I'll see you here in Brisbane.
See you. Cheers, Josh.